So this is my starting point. I don't know of a single school that on its website, the homepage of its website, says, send us your child and we will do everything at whatever cost to squeeze grades out of them and do nothing else. I haven't come across a school that says, I've come across schools that do that, but I haven't come across a school that proudly proclaims that that's what they do. All schools, I think, know, as Ofsted knows, that there is something else afoot. There are other things that we would wish to be attending to or cultivating or nurturing for the children in our schools, as well as transmissions of secure bodies of knowledge, leading to success in high-stakes testing, leading to access to rare and expensive and precious university education and or a wider selection of forms of employment. But within that mix, there are these something else's. So it's like, quite a lot of schools I go to, someone buttonholes me and says to me at some stage, we're not just an exam factory, you know. So the question is, what's what I think of as results plus? We're not talking about, and some people keep trying to push me back into this box, particularly some people who are very vocal on the social media. If you're an educational social media person, will keep trying to persuade you that there's some necessary tension between knowledge and rigour and grades and Shakespeare and algebra on the one hand, and this fluffy, flannelly stuff about life skills or learning habits or something or other on the other. As if, in order to pay attention to the latter, you necessarily had to not care about Shakespeare and algebra anymore. And of course we do. The results of the knowledge transmission are very important, but there's the more. And what I'm interested in is what that more is and how we help it to arise. But some people I've found, and I felt a whiff of this morning, you may or may not agree with me, when they start to talk about that territory, quite rapidly become a bit foggy about it. And it seems to lack a degree of precision, particularly precision around these questions. What exactly is the plus? What is it that we're talking about? What is that extra that we want, that we consider to be of value to children? Exactly how is it going to be cultivated? He didn't, I asked him slightly mischievously, so how, if I was attending to character development, to the building of empathy or attention or resilience or imagination in a year 5 or a year 9 maths lesson, what would that look like? How would that lesson be a bit different from a lesson which wasn't attending to the cultivation of those things? And he didn't have a very good answer. His answer for character development seemed to revolve more around the traditional co-curriculum rather than around what I call the epistemic character development that goes on in individual lessons. And of course, how will we know if we've done it is a crucial question, and a question at the front of this conference today. Lots of people happily smile and nod and sign up to, we want all our children to become more resilient. Resilient has multiple meanings. For the most basic one, in the back of most people's minds, is I would like it if our kids stayed intelligently engaged for longer with things that are difficult or that have turned out to be more difficult than they thought they were going to be. That's my working definition of resilience. Most people sign up for that. It's like our kids give up too quickly. Some of them have succumbed. They've got a little bit of mental malware called the 15-second rule. And I don't know where they got it from, but some of them have it. Which is, I'll try for something for 15 seconds, and if at the end of 15 seconds I can't do it, I'll assume I'll never be able to do it, so I'll give up and chat to my neighbour or wander around the classroom or something like that. In other words, there's a bit of malware got into their minds which undermines their resilience. So the question is, if we're interested in building resilience, in having kids who are less dependent, less passive, less, I don't get it, miss, I can't do it, sir, but more proactive, more robust, more resilient, more resourceful in their approach to learning. Everybody loves that idea. Yes, we'd love that. So the next question is, so what are you doing in your school to reassure yourself or to inform yourselves that your year 5s are indeed persisting for longer intelligently with difficult things than they did in year 4? or your year 9s are doing that than they were in year 8. And people sometimes go a bit quiet because they haven't got to that level of precision. We need to know, don't we? We need to be able to say, is it working, this plus thing, rather than it just being fond hopes and fine words and good intentions. We need to be, if we're going to get sharp and clear about this. So a lot of my work, as you will know, and the work of the other co-conspirators in the Learning Power approach, some of whom I've just name-checked, are concerned about how we give robust answers to these questions. So that, for example, when Ofsted come calling, we have a story, we have a narrative that we can confidently present to them about why we do what we do and why we do it in the way we do it, and why the nature of our pedagogy, why our signature pedagogy in our school is absolutely critical to the development of resilience and empathy and imagination. So you can challenge them on their attempt to annex or to exclude pedagogy from their concerns. One of the forms that this fogginess takes is a retreat into abstract nouns. It's like we can reassure us if we have long words to talk about these things. So people tend to retreat into metacognition. Nobody knows what metacognition. There are at least 7 different meanings. The Education Endowment Foundation doesn't know what metacognition is, and they don't know how it's different from self-regulation. So they lump together everything that might broadly be called character, and they put it in a box grandly called metacognition and self-regulation. Now, your average parent, no disrespect to average parents, will go, what about that? So what does this mean for my child? Could you do that again for me in Anglo-Saxon rather than highfalutin language? So these are some of the terms that we tend to retreat into when we're talking about this territory. So the first thing is, from my 4 questions, what is it exactly that we want kids to develop? Why is it important? How are we going to do it? What are the implications for the way we designed that maths lesson? For whether we start a maths lesson with a grapple problem, which is something that's too hard for any of the children in the class to be able to do easily. Why do we start our maths lessons that way? Because it helps to build their resilience, it helps to build their enjoyment of challenge, and so on. We have the rationale that says that's the way we tend to start our lessons, rather than giving them all the answers and then giving them a worksheet in which all they have to do is learn how to turn the handle and, if all goes well, produce a page of ticks. Doesn't matter whether they found producing that page of ticks easy, so easy peasy that they didn't actually learn anything by producing that page of ticks. Their parents liked it, but from a learning point of view, that's worthless. It's a worthless trophy because nothing was learned in that process. Whereas if everybody starts with a grapple problem, you have a room full of youngsters who understand that learning is what happens when you engage, when you struggle on the leading edge of your competence, not in the comfort zone of your competence. And how much time do you spend in your staff rooms interrogating, critiquing and sharpening that specification? Did those words come to mind? Do you clearly understand what they mean? Are they non-foggy words? Are they words that you would invite your parents to hold your feet to the fire about because they can tell whether you're accountable or not? Unlike weaselly, foggy things like, we want to help all our children fulfill their potential. Right? That doesn't say anything. You have no idea what your children's potential is. And you have no idea when they fulfill... sorry, have you fulfilled your potential? No, seriously, can you remember when it happened? What were you doing at the time? Yes, I think it was about this time last year, I was watching Strictly, and suddenly this feeling came over me. But I fulfilled my potential, that was it. It was just coasting downhill all the way from here on. Can you imagine a head teacher sadly saying to the Board of Governors that I'm terribly sorry to report that only 43% of our year 5s managed to fulfill at least half their potential this year? It doesn't have any grip, does it? It's a place saver when we're talking about the plus, rather than something that gives us real outcome. Well, here are the usual suspects. Most people have a little list. Exhaustive research by me and other people suggests that the core habits that people would like, we would like kids to preserve and stretch and strengthen and have greater confidence in their own curiosity. We'd like them to be adventurous. I was in a school the other day where the school motto was, live adventurously. I like that, right? It has some sort of welly to it, doesn't it? Rather than sort of vague Latin stuff that a lot of schools have because they think it sounds great. In vino veritas or whatever. No, probably not that one, but things like that. Determined. Please don't keep saying grit and resilience and growth mindset. There's a rich English vocabulary for talking about that. We don't have to fetishize this stuff. We don't have to fall back on the technical stuff. There are at least up 17 different ways of talking about sticking with it, being resilient, being brave, being courageous, being tenacious, not giving up, having stickability, right? And that some of those words will have more traction with your students and your children than others. So let's talk to them about what's a good word for that, right? Rather than delivering these highfalutin words to them. Buoyant is the fashionable word at the moment for bobbing back from disappointment, right? Kids who don't kind of go miserable for an hour if they've given what turned out to be a silly answer to something, but bounce back quickly and give you another thought. Collaborative and sociable in their learning. People would love that. It's not just about, yes, we do lots of group work, because you know that lots of group work encourages social loafing and dominance by loud mouths and so on and so on. It's about systematically designing group work so that we make it progressively more complex, so that we are systematically stretching and strengthening the children's ability to be good team players, reliable sounding boards, active listeners, and so on, right? It's not about presuming these things. It's about structuring what we do in the classroom so that these things are stretched just as any good sports coach does, are stretched and strengthened whilst they're doing their maths and their history and their geography and their big rights and their everything else that they're doing. No tension, no disparity, no tug of war between those two things. Articulate, thoughtful, School 21, Oracy 21, the power of the Cambridge group under Neil Mercer, all that his research on exploratory talk. Actually, if you want to know what metacognition is, metacognition is the internalized reflective voice that you pick up as a result of having had conversations with other people about how to make progress with difficult things. Right? Oracy is the parent of metacognition. Vygotsky said, what first occurs between people then becomes part of your own onboard mental equipment. Right? Metacognition is learning to talk to yourself in a helpful way when you're finding things tricky, finding them difficult. How do you do that? By talking to other people in the context of finding things tricky. So exploratory talk is very important. Learning to be concentrated and focused. Some of your schools will have got the mindfulness bug. Mindfulness starts from the idea that the ability to concentrate is a muscle that you can strengthen through practice. It's not something, it's like, oh, he's got ADHD. It's something that everybody can get better at through a particular kind of focused practice. We can get better at resilience, we can get better at collaboration, we can get better at a whole lot of things. So that's the core set. And then there are a whole range of other things. So these are just some. Developing a kind of critical attitude towards knowledge. Most people say that's a really useful mindset to have in the 21st century. Would you not want your 11-year-old daughter, when she goes online, to have a little skeptical bubble in her head saying, hold on a minute, how do I know this is who they say they are? Who's telling me this? In whose interest is it that I believe this or buy this? Wouldn't you? Is that not part of the important onboard safeguarding that we will want all children to have? Not cynical, but an appropriately quizzical, skeptical attitude to knowledge claims. Knowledge is not hard to get these days, but checking, assaying, triangulating, checking the quality, the relevance of knowledge, that's something that you don't get just by Googling. That's something that you should be getting in school. Learning to build your ability to know how to harness your imagination. All kinds of interesting techniques that we could be teaching children from the age of 4 up to, actually 4-year-olds are more imaginative than 14-year-olds. They tend to lose it, that's a matter of empirical fact. So how, first of all, do we protect it, as Picasso said? Every child is born an artist. The problem is that many of them lose it on the way that they grow up. Intellectual humility, what some of those people I alluded to earlier don't have, is correlated with general knowledge and school success. In other words, the ability to use a conditional questioning form of language, like I'm not sure but, or I'm wondering if, or I could be wrong but, or it's my opinion that. To learn to deploy that language, a language which softens the knowledge claims, right, which allows you to inhabit and explore and invites other people into an exploratory space rather than a declamatory space, right? That correlates with success. Empathy, we've already heard talked about today. Shape-shifting I put on this slide, but empathy, being able to adopt multiple perspectives, correlates with children's achievement. If you have a little chat, I read this research study the other day, just last week. If you have a little chat with kids about just drawing their attention to the amazing array of multiple identities that they have, isn't it interesting to have a conversation with them that you're a girl, and you're a daughter, and you're a writer, and you're a dancer, and it's like all of these things, all of these identities are in one body. Isn't that interesting? And you have one group of kids who you have that conversation with, another group who you don't. The first group turn out to be more imaginative, to have a more imaginative, more engaged, more questioning, more productive approach to their learning, a learning task that you set them immediately after that. In other words, if you've activated or refreshed their sense of multiple perspectives, that they can come at things from different directions, that boosts their imaginative. Well, that's worth knowing, isn't it? Right? There's a little tip for you. If you would like your kids through your imaginativeness or their poetry writing or their coming up with scientific reasons to explain floating and sinking, if you're interested in all of that kind of stuff, well, that's worth knowing, isn't it? That there are little things that we can do to boost those things. Building craftsman's life. Some of you, particularly primary school teachers, will have watched a cute little film called Austin's Butterfly. That's terrific. The question is, what sustained, systematic legacy of that has shifted your pedagogy, having watched that film? It's no use saying, wasn't that fun, right? It's like, okay, so how am I going to build into my classroom as a regular part of what the children do are opportunities to have several goes at something and to learn the value of accepting critique from your peers to help you get better next time. Right? That's a pedagogical shift from the focus on solo attainment to collaborative improvement. Right? It's a deep pedagogical shift that in school. Some schools have made that, have kind of made it part of their signature pedagogy that we do a lot of that in our schools. Other schools haven't. Right? They've looked at Austin's Butterfly and thought, oh, how lovely, right? But it hasn't made much of a difference. So it's like being clear, but the more we're clear, the more we get sharp about these things, the easier it becomes to ask ourselves, so what could I do? What little tweaks could I introduce into the classroom, not at the expense of the transmission of bodies of knowledge, but the imaginative deepening of understanding about those bodies of knowledge. What could I add? How could I enrich or adjust my pedagogy so that I'm paying attention to these kind of things? So it's important that we're paying attention to creating a generation of kids who are not frightened or not incapable of addressing complex issues with the requisite complexity of thought. Isn't it? Right? Part of our possibility and our responsibility, that we're cultivating that. So your assessment system, think carefully. Have you made that shift? A shift from an assessment system that notices and values engagement, effort and improvement over an assessment system that values attainment. Snapshots, individual snapshots of attainment. Because if your school revolves around the latter, you have to do that sometimes. The question is, what's the balance and what's the emphasis that we put on these different methods? If your school revolves around that form of assessment, don't be surprised if you're seeing quite a lot of fixed mindset behavior. because that form of assessment will tends to be perceived by students as mistakes are costly. Right? If I only got 7 out of 20, that makes me feel stupid. Right? That's a costly mistake, rather than, ooh, I've got lots to learn here, that's great. Maybe I could do better. Learning reviews we heard about this morning. This is a particular kind of learning review that focuses on the development of learning capacities. This is a classroom observation sheet to have a look at how the students are behaving, what learning habits are they evidencing when you sit at the back of the room and look not at the teacher but at what's going on at the level of the students. For example, these are some of the things, this is quite a sophisticated list of things that you could go fishing for. This is quite high level terms of maturity, just in terms of their social competence as learners. Do students show evidence of knowing when it's best to work alone or with others? The teachers give them opportunities to choose when it's best to work alone or with others. Are they able to use a range of roles in collaborative group work? Do they know what that means? Can they talk about it? Do they listen to others? Do they give evidence of wanting to understand how other people are thinking, of checking their understanding with others? Do they know how to disagree respectfully with each other? Are they sensitive to the group dynamics? Can they spot when 2 or 3 of the students in the group haven't said anything for a while, and just say, do we just check in, is everybody feeling safe enough to participate, as I saw a group of 7-year-olds do in a school a little while ago? Do they share and adopt useful learning strategies from each other? Do they give and take feedback well from each other without getting upset, and so on? Right? This is the kind of thing we can go fishing for if we want to. Out of this kind of learning review comes some observations which schools would find useful. Things like the use of repeated words. These are quotes from a learning review that my friend and colleague Graham Powell conducted a little while ago. Repeated words and phrases about learning is useful for raising awareness, but rapidly becomes ignored through overuse. You know that one, don't you? This is a 6-year-old, Danisha, in a school in North London. She used to be a bright little girl who wouldn't try anything if she didn't know she could look good at it quickly. She used to say, oh, it's hard, it's too hard, I think I'll just leave it. That was her. That was what she was like. But now, she said, since we got BLP in our school, she says, if something's hard, you don't want to say, oh, this is hard, I'll just skip it. So she's talking about how she's changed in her attitude. You try, because the best thing is if you don't try, what's the point? Because when you grow up, you might come to some answer you'll still not know, and you can't skip it then. So Danisha's got it, like why she gets up on a cold February morning to go to school. She's going to have her competence built, as well as to be a good little girl and learn some sums and some maths and so on. Here's the report of the Director of Teaching and Learning from the school. Through a focus on developing key learning skills, the A-level results have steadily risen across the number of years. You can see this is a little while ago. Of all the GCSE papers, 81% were at least 1 grade higher than baseline testing had predicted. It's clear that this shift in pedagogy has given Gordonston students a focus on how they might improve the key life skills they'll need to be better learners equipped for life, and the results go up. Remember, just have your skeptical antennae going if anybody tries to persuade you that you can't do both. So I hope that's enriched your thinking about the uses of assessment. We've had quite a variety of approaches today, but I tried to throw in a range of different things, some of them quite small, quite low-tech, quite low-scale, but a whole range of different ways in which you can reassure yourselves and involve students productively in making sure that your focus is not only on the results, but also on the plus. Thank you very much.